I kind of suspected that it wasn't going to be what you would expect from a grieving husband.
What did he say?
I asked him if anything was new, and he more or less said, yes, lots new, LOL.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. After Mica's death, a waitress, her name's Christiana, whom Pastor Paul had propositioned a few weeks earlier, sent him a text asking what's new. John Paul's response was another shocker. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So what had happened in late February, obviously while he was still married, Pastor John Paul left an almost 50% tip on a receipt along with his number and a smiley face. Now, the amount of the tip was around about $20. And then when they got to texting, he started asking her for pictures of her in a bikini and that sort of thing. The amount of the bill was $46 and he tipped her $20, which is almost 50%. It's certainly well over double the sort of average tip. And so as I say, the waitress ended up texting the pastor, and then after Mica's death texted him what's new, and John Paul responded, a lot is new, LOL. The waitress and the News Nation host go on to address other rumors of possible philandering by Mica's estranged husband. I think he was with a completely different person on the night that she actually died. And this is where I start to feel a little uncomfortable. Do you have that same sense of unease? And it's not so much to do with this issue and this information, although it certainly is, portrays John Paul in a negative way. But it's the feeling that true crime has crossed a line into soap opera. Remember, this was a potential murder investigation. It's not that anymore. And now we see that something else likely happened. So is it appropriate to then continue demonizing the ex-husband, whether he deserves it or not? What I mean is, maybe he was a bad husband. Is it appropriate in the true crime sense, when we're dealing with murder and serious crimes, to sort of elevate this sort of thing to a serious crime? And you might say, you know what, it feels right, it is something that is a very serious thing. Okay, but then is it okay to do that with similar things? What about behavior that you've done or I've done, where you didn't commit murder, but you did something that wasn't very nice? Should one be shamed as part of this whole effort to blame someone for Mica's death? Clearly, the pastor was briskly moving on from his crumbling marriage, and clearly this wasn't something that was helping Mica's mental health. There's no argument with that. But the reality is that, as the waitress says, people do this all the time. I mean, if you elevated this to a crime, wouldn't everyone be behind bars? I'm talking about infidelity. I'm talking about people not behaving with a tremendous amount of integrity. People find themselves at the end of the life of one relationship and they begin to look further afield. That's usually not a crime. But no one's saying that his behavior is okay. Just that reporting on everything he did, that's not actually criminal. people break up all the time, marriages end all the time, and we feel very strongly about how unfair a lot of it is. But is it a crime? It's interesting to me that there seems to be a preference for blaming the pastor rather than dealing with and perhaps trying to understand Mica's mental health. And I must say, I've touched on it very lightly, and people don't seem to want to talk about that aspect. It makes people uncomfortable. So should we not talk about it? Does it feel, it feels better to talk about the pastor, but is that really honestly, truthfully, the area that needs to be dealt with here? In the end, she elected to purchase a firearm. She elected to drive out to a park, and she elected to pull the trigger. I'm not saying there's not just cause to feel angry and resentful about John Paul. That's certainly valid. But I think we are crossing a line when one starts to pursue him in news coverage when he didn't commit the crime. And I think for folks in other countries, it's alarming to see how easily firearms can be purchased and how someone with mental health problems was able to do so as well. If she was able to, let's say if she was unable to buy the firearm for whatever reason, what would have happened next? Perhaps Mica would have had time to reevaluate the situation. Perhaps she would have had time to talk to someone. Another issue not being addressed, which is kind of an elephant in the room, and yes, I do know that this is where angels fear to tread, but I wouldn't be the most authentic voice in true crime if I didn't tread in this area. It's this notion that Mica stopped taking her meds because she was led to believe that she was healed. I think it's clear from the final outcome here that she wasn't healed. I think it's clear from the final outcome here that she was misled. And I think if you want to point a finger to anyone here, and I know, again, it doesn't feel emotionally, it doesn't resonate as much, it doesn't feel as good to go into this area. But what about pointing the finger to whoever claimed that she was healed and convinced her in her mind that she didn't need to continue taking her medication? Because that is, in the end, I think, what played a very big role in this whole thing. Medication for health issues, physical or mental, are tempting. We are tempted to take a pill. And, there's a big drug problem around the world where people, when they want to feel good, they take a pill. When they want to deal with feeling bad, they take a pill. When they're overweight, they take medication. I'm not saying I'm not one of those people. I'm saying that whole thing there's something wrong with that psychology. It's the easy way out, the easy path. But does the easy path get you where you need to go? There are a host of underlying factors that drive us into states of poor physical or mental health. And yet instead of dealing with these cautiously, carefully, putting in the effort, trying to untangle the original behaviors, trying to understand the original behaviors, well, we prefer this simple, quick, easy fix of taking a pill. We don't like to acknowledge the difficulty that we're in. We don't like to accept that we need to change. It's much easier just to take a pill. And guess what? It usually doesn't work. The quick, easy fix is usually not something that does fix the thing, because you don't change the underlying problem. It doesn't work, or it has nasty side effects, in Mica's case, weight gain and slurring. True crime, by the way, teaches quick fixes too. Everything is blindingly obvious and shocking and simple in true crime. Someone is obviously to blame, and it's ridiculously simple how someone did something. And what they did is explicit and shocking. No, it's not. In real life, things are more subtle and complicated and difficult and tedious. It's tempting to believe someone is clearly and obviously to blame for something that happens. It's harder to appreciate not only the complexity of human motives and drives, but also our own roles, our own beliefs, our own biases in the situations we find ourselves in. Also, was Mica's sincere belief in God helping her deal with her mental health? Was her choice to trust a pastor well-founded? Was her choice to trust someone who told her, I guess, what she wanted to hear, that she was healed? Was that helpful? One has a sense of a crooked pastor who knows how to manipulate his flock to get what he wants. We get a sense of someone who preaches morality to everyone else, yet seems to be a very ordinary man in another sense. What people in positions like John Paul prey on is the naivete of the average person, the average person's lack of critical thinking. And let me tell you, when you choose quick and easy solutions, you are showing a lack of critical thinking. You are making a complex situation easy, and it's not easy. Life requires critical thinking to extricate ourselves from complicated problems. And so what do you think? Do you think people are getting better at this or getting worse? Some of the most prescribed drugs are for overweight people and people at risk of heart attacks. And right up there with those prescription drugs are drugs for depression. We don't know how to deal with our own unhappiness. Just as true crime is often vastly oversimplified, we like the idea that our complicated health can be simplified by simply ingesting a pill. But the right approach is the harder, more difficult, and complicated approach. Think about that. There's the easy approach that doesn't work, but that's very popular. And then there's the harder approach that does work, but it's unpopular because it's more difficult. It requires more effort. It requires unlearning what we have learned.
No different, only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
Unlearning means undoing our behaviors by putting in effort, but it also means understanding that whole process, which is not easy. It's not easy to realize we've made a mistake, we've wasted time. And so to undo those behaviors, we've got to put in effort, we've got to exercise, we've got to control our own moods through self-discipline. We've got to resist certain urges and appetites and feelings. And that requires strength of will. It's not easy, it's hard. Much of the interest in the Mica Miller case is about integrity, and specifically the lack of integrity we apparently see in her partner. But I'm not sure many people know what real integrity is. It requires, again, effort, discipline, and the courage to take responsibility for ourselves and for our own decisions. It means not following the popular path. It means resisting the urge to feel biased one way or another in the face of reality. It means not always blaming someone else or something else. It means looking at reality in the face, and that's not easy. And yet true crime teaches this lesson over and over, the simple idea that someone else is to blame. Again, reality isn't so simple, and the only real way to create a better world isn't by finding someone to blame, but by raising our own standards and letting the change start with us. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.